I want to welcome you to the final workshop, I believe, of Discovery Days, Tools for Teams. I'm Beth Hodges. I'm the Director of Research Development for Florida State University. And with me is Dr. Kassie Ernst, faculty member and wonderful individual from the College of Engineering. So we're going to talk to you a little about teams. So working in teams can be challenging. I'm sure that many of you have been involved in teams that maybe didn't have the best communication, or maybe you felt like you didn't have a voice, or you have a leader that is not allowing for input. All these things can be extremely common, especially when you have people who are used to doing things by themselves, or they're just leaders by nature. Today, Kassie and I are going to walk you through some tools that can help teams be healthier, stronger, and more effective. So today's discussion, I'm going to quickly talk about NSF germination, and then we're going to go through several different tools that we hope will help you. Going to talk about some additional tools and resources available on campus, and then finally, hopefully, we'll have time for some Q&A at the end. Germination is a program that NSF has to allow groups of individuals to focus on team science. So about a year and a half ago, myself along with 4 other directors of FloRDA Research Development offices, we're all part of something called the FloRDA Research Development Alliance. We got together and we put forward a proposal to provide practical team science experience and training to researchers, while also allowing them to create faculty teams to focus on coastal challenges. We were awarded this grant, and last fall we engaged in an 8-month-long activity with faculty members from across the state. Kassie was one of the team members in our cohort, and I served as a coach of another cohort. And we learned a lot of these tools, and that's why we thought it would be a great thing to bring these back to campus. So that's kind of how we got where we are today. Just a little plug for the FloRDA Research Development Alliance in case any of you are involved in research development, maybe at the college level. You work with faculty to help them with their grants. This is an organization that meets virtually every month and once a year in person to talk about best practices. We've been able to secure a couple different grants to help in team science now because we really want to help each other. It also is great because we can find collaborators easier. So if you ever cannot find somebody at FSU as a collaborator, you can come to any of the people in the research development office because we can reach out to our colleagues around the entire state to find collaborators. So 4 team science tools we're going to look at today. Relinking and linking, it's a great icebreaker tool that Kassie's going to go over shortly to help teams understand each other's expertise. There's a collaboration agreement that I'm going to talk about that helps get everybody on the same page before an activity gets started. A problem tree, which is a great brainstorming activity. And then finally, a quick talk about thumbs up, thumbs down. That will be the last one. So I'm going to turn this over to Kassie to talk about linking and relinking.
All right. Thank you, Beth. Happy to be here. Team science is really important to me. I care a lot about climate information and where climate information goes into the decision-making process. And that's where I have focused a lot of my research. And one of the things we know about the climate and data information that we need for decision makers is that producing it in teams in an interdisciplinary fashion increases the use and usability and uptake of that information. And so it's important to me that team science happens because I believe that we get better outcomes from it. The Florida Coastal Challenges process was really great because we got together with a lot of different researchers from around the state of Florida to see where everyone was at, and we participated in these tools. The linking relinking tool, you all have it on your on your tables right now, and it's that first one. I'm going to go back just so you can see. This is the worksheet that you go through. This is a great facilitative tool for new teams as they're coming together. Ideally, the team members have a general idea of what other people do, kind of they know who they are. Hopefully they're on a first name basis. And it's a 20 to 30 minute activity. It might seem like a small amount of time, but it does a great job of laying the groundwork for how teams communicate with each other. So it does a couple of different things. It teaches you about the research interests and potential opportunities within your group, but it also gives people a chance to correct and readjust people as they go in the team setting. I'd recommend this for teams of 3 to 5. It will take a little bit longer with teams of 5. And it's important that you follow the steps that we're going to lay out. One thing that you want to ask yourself at the beginning is, who is your facilitator? If you have an external facilitator who has a stake in the team doing well, it's important that they know the goal of the process coming in, and also that either facilitator, in group or out of the group, has prepped the team members to say, hey, we're going to do some activities, we're going to need everyone's participation, come ready to interact. This is important because when you're on a team doing science together, or any kind of team, you have those assumptions about who the major player is, who's participating only a little bit, and who just shows up. And so ideally you're setting the stage before the day to say, all right, we want everybody to come and participate. The actual activity is you sit in a group, ideally in person. This does work best in person. I want to say one more thing about the facilitator. If you have a facilitator within your group, I would think about who that is. Hopefully you're doing a couple of different tools, and in an ideal world, you're sharing that facilitation role. So I take on one facilitation tool, another person does another one. This helps to avoid kind of singling someone out as the already established PI. It also might help to avoid relying on the person that you already perceive as doing like the administrative tasks or people-facing tasks. So try and share those responsibilities when you can up front. To start, everyone should fill out the table on their own based off of what they think about the other person's research interests. So you're filling out your own research interests. It's important that you put those down because you want something to reference when somebody tells you what you do. And then you're also putting down the research interests that you perceive someone else does. So I see Maria Paula in the group here. I would write down what I think her research interests are based off of my connection with her. And I might not know that she's getting a master's in public administration. I just know her through my connection with the Center for Leadership and Service. So I put down those, and then I also think about the opportunities that we have with each other. I'm going to put this up so you can see. To me, it's important that you're thinking about the opportunities between you and the other person. You're not thinking in the whole group, just to give you an idea within this opportunity section of what might be different between Benito and Margot, and then yourself, Benito, and Cara. Once everyone has filled out the worksheet all together, like on their own, separately, without talking, that's when you come together as a group and you talk through it. So you have a facilitator, hopefully, who's asking someone to present their own research interest first, and then present what they think the other person's research interest is. This is the opportunity for that second person to come up and say, actually, Benito, this is great. I'm glad that you know that I do large-scale human population data sets, but that's something I did like 10 years ago. My work has shifted into this, and so this is what I do now, which if you're a researcher in the room, you know that happens a lot, that you shift and move your direction as you move forward. That little correction, that conversation that you have is really key to establishing shared norms and values and open communication in a group. This is a low-risk way to have someone who doesn't speak up often advocate for themselves and share something that they should know about really strongly, because they are the researcher, they are the person who knows themselves really well. So if you're sitting in the audience and you're like, this is a roundabout way to just learn everyone's research interests, I want you to know that there's multiple objectives from this tool that you'll be getting. And one of it is that everyone is contributing, and you're also practicing a bit of a back and forth, because if you're doing research well, there are going to be times where you disagree and have to come to some conclusion or make a choice based on that disagreement. There's one thing I wrote down. It's important that you take notes throughout the process on that worksheet. So as you're being recalibrated, you should be taking notes and learning about the person and adjusting it. You want to save your own worksheet, and I would recommend creating a final worksheet with everyone as the recalibrated one, and I'd recommend saving these and documenting them. They're really useful moving forward. Another big part of this process is to reflect on this and summarize it as you go through. And then it's important to me to share the science behind it for this one in particular, because as you're writing proposals and you're talking about team science, more and more funders are asking for the why behind what you're doing. And so there is research backed into this. This helps create transactive memory, which is our shared understanding of who knows what. And so using that term, being able to explain it and talk about it is important. But it also helps with knowledge integration and creating integrative capacity, which is our ability as groups to combine diverse expertise and skills into productive collaboration to create new knowledge. And so understanding the why behind these tools is important, because it leads to building that foundation for how you're going to collaborate moving forward. And that, I think, is a pretty good summary. So I'm going to let Beth talk about collaboration agreements.
Thank you. So the next, as Kassie mentioned, is the collaboration agreement. You have one on your desk. So let's talk a little bit about what a collaboration agreement is. It's a tool that facilitates shared purpose and sets expectations. Expectations for communication, expectations for team behavior. I've referred to this as the prenup of your of your arrangement. And personally, I think every team should go through this exercise before you get started. In our teams, as we worked on the Germination project, you know, at first, I think there was I don't understand why we're taking, you know, an hour of our valuable time to do this. And later, it was determined, wow, this saved a lot of time, a lot of misunderstandings where it could have thrown us back, you know, way back from where we could have been. It let us continue to progress. So I think these are very valuable. A good time to use this, I think as soon as the team has been formed, you should get together and have this discussion. There's a lot of reasons for having these discussions ahead of time and setting healthy foundations. I'm going to highlight some of these once we go along. Basically, this is to get everybody on the same page, and everyone needs to get there. A lot like Kassie's, this really should be done in person. Ideally, I think it's great to have a facilitator that is not a part of the team. That's not always possible. So again, you could separate the discussion. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different headers in here, and you could divide the leadership of walking through this by your team members. So it gives everybody a voice, because as she mentioned, it's easy for somebody to start being established even unconsciously as a leader if somebody is taking over the whole thing. So this is an example of one that is completed. You have a blank one, but I'm just going to talk about a few of the different items within this, probably one from each section for the sake of time. But let's take a look at the area in blue. What goals, anticipated outcomes, and products of the collaboration? What are they? What are the goals? Have that discussion so you know that everybody is aiming the same direction right away. What are the outcomes? You know, what do we want to get out of this? What are our products going to be of this collaboration? A lot of times is we're going to put forward a proposal, right? But sometimes it's not. My team, they decided they weren't ready and wanted to publish together first. So after going through this, they realize, we need some initial steps. We need some initial work together before we feel like we can then go forward with a full proposal. So they will be publishing together. Moving down into roles, responsibilities, and project management. Some important, well, they're all important, but how will important decisions be made? That is key. Is it as a team? Is there some way that you're going to decide, is it going to be voting by whatever is most popular? Is it whoever's been the established PI is going to make the decision for all? Have those talks up front, because as you're going along, if there is assumed that the person who's going to be PI is making the decisions assumed by that person but not the others, that can cause a lot of conflict. How will changes be made? You have to pivot a lot. How will changes be made? And budget. Budget is very important. Have that talk about how those decisions will be made with the budget. Is it one person? Is it a team? Have those talks. Moving down to communication, what will our communication norms be? For the team I worked with, one of the decisions they made is this team will never talk offline, but if an email goes out about this, it goes to the entire team. So everybody's staying on the page and there's not offline discussions. So then you come to a meeting and people feel blindsided by some decisions that other people have been making. So, but having those out loud of how you're going to do these, what tools, my team decided we hate Slack. Please, we are not using Slack. We are going to use Teams to post our information, and this is how we're going to communicate. And all that was taken care of in this, hour-long discussion up front. Moving down to norms and functioning. So some of this is behavioral. How will we ensure it's safe to take risks and raise concerns? If you're senior faculty, you may not think that's an issue, but if you have an assistant professor on your team, maybe somebody that reports to you, having that discussion of safe space, having the psychological safety issue brought up, that everything is fair game, we will discuss it, we won't be dismissing people's ideas, everything is up. That sets a healthy groundwork moving forward, that people know that if they have an idea, bring it up. So that's team norms and functioning, again, is a lot of behavioral type issues. How will we manage conflicts? Have that discussion. If it's a scientific or if it's an interpersonal, how are we going to manage that? Finally, authorship and credit. From what I understand, that can be the most contentious part when people are working together. How are you going to decide who gets credit? Who gets listed first or second? So another thing I included here you might want to look at is the next page in your packet is an authorship determination scorecard. This was adapted from something from the APA, and is just a way to look at how much time the different people are investing into this activity. And it can also be one of those things that helps you avoid, some hurt feelings at the end. I thought I was going to be this. Well, this has already been laid out. We've already decided who's doing what and how much time. This is just another one of those things, like I said, like a prenup, you already have all your parameters set before moving forward. So you can move forward and focus on the work at hand. So next, we're going to talk about the problem tree.
All right. We are rolling through these.
We are.
Yeah.
That gives you time.
I know. It gives us time to participate. This is a brainstorming activity, and it helps to depict a problem space and identify causes and impacts. I think it's important to use this as a learning object when a new team is formed or when a new project is taking off. And I also think it's helpful when you have read this new exciting funding announcement way before the full plan is out, and you see all the special flashy words in the 2 pages, and you come together around the problem that they've identified within a funding opportunity announcement. That's that first chance, possibly, to get together and centralize over a specific problem. I like this to develop a shared mental model and decide on topics and areas of the problem to pursue. This is the beginning of a shared conceptual framework. This is the beginning of the experts in the room coming together and visually representing the root causes, and then we're going to call them root causes because we're trying to envision the tree, and branching impacts of an issue. This is an example of a problem tree, and we're actually going to work through part of it, but I'm going to explain a couple of specific details around this. It's really helpful for complex problems. Typically, when honestly, my team struggled with ours. We were handed a problem, and we really wanted to refine it, but we were challenged to keep the problem where it was, which ours was like Florida is a complex ecosystem, right? And so we had a lot of things. It was way too big, thank you. But the challenge for our group was to keep it big. But some other groups did refine, and so it just kind of depended on where we were at with it, but it was huge and unwieldy, and so we took longer than an hour to do this. I think the initial hour to get it set up is great, and then ideally you have time to come back to it and reference it. You can do this virtually and in person, but if you're going to do it virtually, it is absolutely necessary that you explain how to use a virtual whiteboard if you want everyone to participate. We may think that everyone has done it before, but it's one of those things, like if you haven't logged on to Zoom in 6 months or something, then you have to relearn it. And so while you're doing what I'm doing right now, it makes sense to pull up the whiteboard and to send a link to it in the chat, and make sure, ideally, you have someone behind who is running operations who can help troubleshoot with people while you're explaining it. You should put the first sticky up, that's the problem. And so in this one, we're doing uneven impacts of environmental degradation. And then you should create 2 other sticky notes at least to show them what it's like to create the sticky notes and show them the quick ways to put them together. If you're explaining this virtually, use an easy problem at first, maybe before a break, so that everyone can practice, and ask them to either put their initials on the 3 stickies that they post, or send you a direct message saying that they've done it. So that way, if there are any issues, everyone has hopefully solved them by the time you do the real problem. I've done this virtually before, and if you don't do that participation expectation exercise at the beginning, you're going to get the people who already know how to do it and the people who are actually paying attention in the Zoom room to do it, and that is not everybody. I guarantee there's other people who are paying attention, don't want to figure it out, or who aren't paying attention and need that extra push to get there. Similarly, you want to show the examples in person. We're going to do a practice as we go, but I'm going to go through the overview first. Make sure you're taking pictures and screenshots. You are going to see an evolution of the problem tree over time, and I'll show you what this looks like. The first thing you want to do is explain the tree. The first thing you want to do is explain the tree. None of these are mine. You're going to see ours, and I'm not embarrassed, but it's too big of a problem. So it was a great point. It takes about 2 to 5 minutes to provide the explanation that I just did about the concept of the problem tree. Root causes on the bottom as the roots of the tree, branching impacts on the top. It can be helpful to color code, and then collectively decide on a central problem. This usually takes 5 to 10 minutes. This is where a facilitator comes in handy, because you do not want to spend hours just debating the central problem. You want to be able to agree on one for the sake of this exercise, and say that nobody's writing anything in gold on a sticky note, right? They're sticky notes. No one's laminating them. They're not going to exist for 200 years. And then you spend some time focusing on the root causes. So you encourage everyone to spend time focusing on the root causes at first. And that takes about 5 to 10 minutes. And you spend some time after that focusing on the branching impacts. That should also take 5 to 10 minutes, where everyone is, if you look on your tables, you'll see permanent markers and sticky notes. We'll see how good a job I do at explaining this. And so you want people to be writing their root causes and branching impacts as on their sticky notes and actually putting them on the board. During this stage, when you're identifying the causes and impacts, it is important that you point out that we're not discussing or debating whether something goes on the board. This is your time to put the things on the board that you think applies, and no one in your group gets to give you permission for it. You have permission. And when you do facilitative exercises like these, you cannot give too much permission typically. Once in a while you have a group who wants to go forever. As long as you give some time parameters, giving people permission to participate is important, and you won't regret saying that. I guarantee it. Once you have your causes and impacts, they'll look more like this one, all over the place, maybe overlapping, maybe extending beyond the Post-it board space. Then you get to go into grouping causes and impacts by theme. This is where some discussion and debate can happen in terms of where things go. If maybe, I said the energy-water nexus and somebody said the energy-water-land nexus, we can agree that they're similar enough to just keep one on, right? So you can have some discussion and debate and clarify those things. And you are, at this point in time, moving the Post-it notes. So you don't want to just write on a poster. You do want the Post-it notes because you want to be able to move them. And it is helpful to have tape because eventually those Post-it notes will wear out. Because if you look at this one, we did have to tape some of them. And so the last thing that you're doing is organizing them by theme. Sorry, I did a weird turn. And getting them into their specific boxes. I think it's important to keep even the really weird outliers up there somewhere as outliers. It doesn't mean that you have to focus on them. I would just like to acknowledge that someone did put something out there that doesn't fit. So an outlier category does help, and it can be useful. You want to take a picture pre-sorting and post-sorting, and something that I think your group had happen and my group had happen is we ended up moving to a whole different board because our problem did get refined in some manner. It focused in more specifically on the problem scenario that we were looking at as we identified the root causes and the branching impacts. So I would imagine starting here and then creating a new poster board with a more refined problem or maybe a blank space where the problem goes, and then put the topics in there and then refine that problem in the center. Each of these need their reflection, recalibration time. So once you have it all together, making sure someone has taken a picture of it, and you can talk about those themes and and check in with the group to see if your problem is clear enough. If you're doing this in a situation where multiple teams are doing this at once, this is an opportunity to step back and share the problem with the wider group and ask for feedback. But making sure you're spending about 5 to 10 minutes reflecting on the exercise and making sure you've got everything down you need to get down. The important part to me related to this outcome is that this is where maybe everyone in this room has not read one of those conceptual framework building papers, but science is full of conceptual framework building papers, and this is a way a conceptual framework is built collaboratively, right? It is something that we can turn into something that you eventually put into a paper that shows the interacting processes and the feedback loops and the overacting coupled systems and where they interplay and overlap. So we often think that we're not doing that stuff when we're doing these kinds of activities, but it is rare to be able to bring a diverse group of experts into a group together and get them to center focus on a specific problem. And so there's opportunities to use this as you build out. Of course, you don't pause it right here, right? You have to turn it into something, and your research informs it, but you can use this in your methods, in your background literature, even when you're referring to what your results and discussion look like, to call to to point out what you thought were the cases and then what you learned. If you're someone who is looking to build out a conceptual framework like that, PowerPoint has a good starting place. When PowerPoint gets too simple, I personally like this program called Graph Editor or Y Editor. It is a simple program that's existed for a while that does a lot of process flow diagrams, and it will move things for you. And the thing I like about Graph Editor is it's not a complex program, but you can add complexity into the diagrams and figures that you create with it. So that would be my recommendation for that. So don't undersell the work that you're doing when you're putting Post-it notes on a poster board. It can turn into something very foundational to the work that you all are doing collaboratively. Should we try it, or do you want to do your thumbs up, thumbs down?
No, I think we should try it. I would just add for our team, this was a good team building exercise too, because we had folks that didn't know each other terribly well, and getting to hear them explain why they put what they put on here actually helped everyone to get to know each other a little better and understand where they were coming from, because we had different disciplines too, which you should, any interdisciplinary activity, you're coming from different places. So you could have two people with pretty much the same Post-it, but we're coming from it, what they meant was different. So having the discussion was very important. And like Kassie said, you can't tell that, so this one was ours, this one on the side. We had, actually, those Post-its were pretty thick as we started clumping them together. And we ended up changing what the main vision problem statement was, because it really helped clarify, well, we're really talking about this when you look at both of these things. And you'll also see sometimes that a root cause and an impact can be the same thing, because some things feed each other. So it was a tremendous, building, getting to know each other, feeling each other out. It was just a really good exercise, and I think what they did after this was improved from where it would have been had we not. It increased the quality of the overall outcome of the activity.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree totally. This is the problem tree that I worked on, and as you can see, our problem is unwieldy, but the helpful thing about that problem is that I was lucky. I was in a team of 3, right? And we actually all centered and focused on, we had done a lot of resource management work ourselves. We all had done a lot of GIS work, and we had a passion for making sure that facilitative processes, ecosystem-based management planning, those types of things were clearer and more standardized and more clearly articulated throughout the research process. So it was big, but it gave us something to refocus on when we got into our more specific research interests. So it was a useful exercise, but I would recommend trying to drill down a little bit further than that problem, because we took too long. So, especially if you're with a new team, and especially if you're doing it virtually, you want to have an easy problem tree, okay? So I'm giving you all permission to locate Post-it notes and permanent markers and think about the root causes and the branching impacts. We're not gonna spend 5 to 10 minutes on each. I'm just asking you to think through what some root causes and branching impacts might be for drinking too much coffee. And if you're the magical adults in the room who don't rely on caffeine, I know you have a coworker or partner or someone who does. And so think broadly. The one rule that's super important, if you're ever gonna facilitate, keep the permanent markers away from the whiteboard. So it's the most important thing, so you can get invited back to this really nice seminar room. Permanent markers, stay on the table. Post-it notes, come up to the whiteboard. So I would recommend doing the easy problem before a break, and encouraging people to do a certain number, trying to say like 3 to 5 is helpful when it's just like the fun play problem, just so they know they should actually take a break and not sit there and think too hard about it. And I would tell them to take a mental break, go take a walk, do all the things they need to do, and come back ready to think about the centralized problem. But be aware, if you tell them the big problem before the break, they're just going to sit around and talk about that. So you could wait to unveil the problem so people are fresh and thinking through, or you can think about which one you actually want to happen. Also, if you do this on a whiteboard, you can also use your whiteboard marker to kind of draw connections and do that kind of thing. Anything else you'd recommend, Beth, with this one?
I do think a whiteboard is good. We did it on these big 3M stickies, and you run out of space. So the board was much more helpful.
Yeah, you run out of space and you think it's worth keeping the paper ones, but if you'll see over there, there's some paper ones that I have that just don't make it, and so a high quality picture is what you're trying to go for. It is easy to jump right in. It's easy to visualize. You can then move them afterwards, and if you've done other facilitative tools, you can also add in voting if you want to, if you're like working on narrowing something down, and so it helps with the prioritization as well. It's a good place to start. Also, if you are not ready to coalesce around a problem, then I would go to the mind map, where you just are talking about a specific theme, and I would go to the mind map and kind of organize the space first. That might be a first step if you're not even at the stage where you're ready to zero in on a certain problem, which isn't a bad thing. And we could talk about that after if you had time, but I think for the sake of time, Beth, do you have anything you want to say about these?
Sure. Well, this whole area is not enough sleep.
Okay, not enough sleep. Cool. Okay.
Some others, all great. So we have headache prevention, addiction, habit, essential fuel.
Children might be my favorite one. Yes. Thank you, parents in the room.
Yes. Habit. I'm a decaf drinker, but I still have to have it every morning. So habit is definitely in there. We're dropping. The hustle, anxiety, habit. So there's a lot of good ones in here. We can see sleep is a big portion of it. So that could actually be a whole other discussion in itself, right? So up here, these are interesting. Anxiousness, shakes, elevated heart rate, headaches, shivers, discolored teeth, dragon breath, frequent bathroom trips, not enough sleep, right? You drink too late, caffeine addiction, jitters, stained teeth, yes. Increased steps for going to the bathroom a lot. That's the first positive one I've heard. Joy. There's some joy. So you can see how, you can work from here. If this was a problem, a scientific issue or something, you can start seeing different, especially when you have folks from different disciplines, you can have a very wide range of what people will say. So it gives you a lot of fuel moving forward, I think.
Absolutely. The other thing I would say is that, and I forgot to say this, so I understand this, an impact and a root cause, they don't, even if this is a problem, right, there could be a positive impact to it, right? I enjoy my cup of coffee, right? There is a thing about having too much coffee, but there are the potential to have some of those impacts of like, well, I'm not gonna change it, and there are good things related to it as well. This also helps visualize where some of those like processes come in, where those feedback loops are. And then for those of you who do teach, this is my pitch to help you flip your classes, right? Do activities like this with your students and get them up and moving and thinking about these things. Maybe start one class with the mind map and then move to the problem tree and then expand on it. And then if you're teaching people who you want to be researchers someday, remember that you're teaching them how to do it, right? You're teaching them. And so if your research seminar is about reading 5 papers and showing up and talking about it, and that's the whole class, and you're not bringing in any of these team science techniques, they're going to start behind the team science train as well. And so you're teaching them how to do research, and so bringing these things into the classroom is an important part of that. And even undergrads, but especially grad students, teaching them how to do it and then telling them to facilitate the process groups is a way that you can work towards flipping your classroom. And if you don't know the term flipping your classroom, meaning that you're doing active work in the classroom, and some of the learning and lecture-based stuff happens outside of the classroom.
Can I say this also can translate if you are a center director or you have a staff and there's some issue going on maybe externally and you really want to have this time to allow all of your folks to have impact, this is another good use for this. So the last tool is extremely simple, but I'm going to tell you a little story of how I used it and why it was important. Thumbs up, thumbs down is a simple process to indicate agreement, disagreement, or if there's uneasiness with how things are going. It can be used at any time with a team. It can help address things in a lesser confrontational way, and everybody on the team should use it. And it's as simple as this. How do you feel about the way things are going right now? You know, how do you think you will use any of these tools possibly? See,
oh, you're actually asking.
Yep, yeah. So, as a lead person, you can quickly gauge how things were going. So I had a team, and I was up front like this, and we were talking about what were our steps going to be. As I mentioned, we decided not to go for a grant, but to publish together, right? So we had these folks, and everybody's kind of holding hands and singing the same song, and another person joined a little later than the rest. And that person came in and said, we just need to go for a grant. We need to go for a grant right away. And I could see, and the person was sitting towards back, I could see not everybody was feeling that same way. You have some people who will go, okay, well I guess we could do that because they don't like confrontation and maybe it wasn't their thing. And then you have other people who maybe are quiet and they just don't want to say anything, but they're not real happy. For me, I was watching faces, and everybody's happy faces, a couple of them, their demeanor changed. They did not look happy, but they were not going to speak up. And so I said, so we were all kind of here, and I get the impression that we're maybe not all right here on how we're going. Can just tell me, how are you doing? And two people went, and I said, okay. So there was a point we were all here, and now some of us are here, and that's okay. But let's step back to where we were all here. And let's walk through what the next step was and where we're going. And actually, we ended up in the same place again because we had a senior person who was very strongly saying we need to do this and wasn't engaging other people. And so we stepped back again. And I said, we're still not here. Let's talk about the different things we could do. Because we can easily see that the problem here is what is the outcome we're going for. And then as people then started feeling like, well, I just don't know that we know each other well enough. And these discussions started happening, and they slowly started opening up. They got back to, we're going to publish a paper. And all of a sudden, everybody was smiling again. And I said, so how's everybody feeling about how we're moving forward? Everybody was here. Very simple thing to do, but you can quickly gauge. You can even do it on a Zoom, as long as you can see people. And it doesn't have to be, I hate it or I love it. Some people are kind of like, I'm not loving it, But they don't have to come out and verbally say it. It's just not some people's nature to come up, especially, like I said, when you have senior people and lesser senior people. So it's a tool that can be used anytime in any situation to just gauge in a lesser confrontational manner how things are going. So a quick, easy tool. Don't even need to give you a handout for that one. I want to give you some other resources. The Florida Team Science Learning Objects website that is where you will find these and more. As Kassie said, it's not published yet because it's in the final stage of people reviewing it. So you guys get to see it before anybody else. It'll walk you through about 8 different tools you can use at any time, and we'll give you a sheet of step by step. Step 1, introduce this. Step 2, do this. And it gives you examples and it gives you templates. So it gives you kind of what you have here, but then some completed things as well, so you can see how it's been done in the past. The Collaboration and Team Science Field Guide, that is not ours, that is put out by, I believe, NIH. I also included my office's collaboration page, which has a lot of different collaboration resources, because when you're dealing with teams, sometimes you need to find people. There's a lot of information there. And then I wanted to mention the Shared Scientific Portal. Let me bring this up right here. And Soma is in the back and runs this. Would you like to speak to what this is and when people would use this?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is available to you, all of you, and also from my.fsu.edu. It's a simple way for you to search for any of the shared facility instruments throughout the FSU campus. We have over 560 of them. Therefore, you can search by the top one, or you are looking for, let's say, centrifuge or a cold box or whatever it is, you can search by the group. There are about 25 shared facilities. That means anybody in FSU, this is open to SUS. Anybody in the SUS can use it. You can share, search by the facility, or if you know the department, what all that department has.
Okay. Are there any questions for Kassie or myself? Yes?
I had one. I wrote down order. Okay, so back to the collaboration agreement.
Yes.
How do you deal with people, or where do you cover the part where you deal with people who are violating the agreement?
That's a good question. So, and I should have brought that up, so thank you for mentioning that.
And Beth, I'm going to repeat the question. Where is it in the agreement where you deal with people who have violated the agreement, correct? Okay.
Yes. So, another good reason to use this tool is you can revisit this. It's recommended that you do it, depending on how long your engagement is with this team. It could be every 6 months, it could be every year, or if there's some people not following along, it's a good time to say, let's revisit this and make sure that we're still, following this, or if we need to change anything, because this is also something that isn't necessarily set in stone, but any changes should be agreed upon by the entire team. So that gives you the opportunity to make sure everybody remembers, we said we were going to do X. So that is one of those times you would bring it up. So that's how it's recommended to use it, as a tool to bring people back. This is an agreement, and just like a lot of agreements, when people start violating, you have to remind them, you have to go back, and so we agreed we would do this. And if there's disagreement that maybe this wasn't the best path, let's talk about this as a team to make sure we know how we're going to manage moving forward. So, yeah.
So Beth, in terms of when we apply for a grant, and we have a sense that the sponsor is real focused on applications that really demonstrate a team science approach, are there criteria that the panels will use to score an application by demonstrating the adoption of certain practices or concepts of team science to make it a more competitive application? Do you have a sense of that?
That is.
Oh, so the question about what are the criteria that some of the funding agencies use to assess how good your approach to team science is? Yeah, great question.
Okay. So, like with any grant solicitation, there's always information as to how they're going to score you. So the first thing is see if that is an issue. I haven't seen any myself, but I'm sure there are. I think the Team Science Handbook and having these kind of things that you can use and say you're using. The website that we provided here also gives you the source of the background of how these were developed, and you could also use that verbiage to add to what you're doing. I think it's very important to establish, especially for large efforts, that you have established norms to make sure your team stays healthy. I think you can mention these, that we're going to be utilizing a collaboration agreement to establish norms. We will be using this. We plan to check in with our team to make sure that, you know, everything is going as it was planned. You can definitely, you know, teams have gone poorly. People have walked away from teams because of issues that could have been addressed early. So I think, you know, as far as the grants, I would say if it's required in it, you can include it. If it's not required, you can include information of how you will keep your teams healthy. I honestly don't think that people thought about this as much in the past, but as more and more agencies are asking for interdisciplinary approaches to solve issues, team science becomes more and more important.
That's one space I would recommend, is if there is an interdisciplinary approach section or like an approach to team design section that usually does ask for that. And then I also think of it when they ask about stakeholders or end user collaboration, if you're applying to things like that. I do evaluate some scientific teams that a specific funding agency puts out, and whenever they announce a planning grant first and then they announce a follow-up, which they just did, they're looking for that throughout the process, and they're focused on stakeholder end user engagement, but that is like still relates to team science. So bringing these tools in through those processes will help get you seen, because as I've been talking to them through assessing the planning grant first and then the next stage, one of the main comments that they had was that their own planning grants needed more work in terms of how specifically they're going to approach how they do these things, and they weren't specific enough. And so I would focus on stakeholder end user, and then your actual like conceptual approach is where I'd put them in.
I had a question about use of these tools in these the size of the team and the effectiveness of using these tools, right? So a lot of times with these, we have, for example, a large center grant that has several teams within it. So have you guys had experience in thinking about where are the best places or ways to use this when there are teams within teams in your big teams?
I have learned in the past year through this and through an activity I'm doing now with the office, the value of subdividing teams. It's hard to get group consensus for one. I think more and more people disappear in the background when you have more people. The quiet people get more quiet, and the more assertive people get more assertive because they want their voice heard. And so, for example, we have a strategic planning activity going on right now, and intentionally the group of 24 were divided into 4 different teams so that there was more of a voice, and then those leads of the teams will come together. Just because I think it ends up a little healthier, in my opinion. Collaboration agreement, I think you can do with a larger team. Some of these you really cannot, and there's value in doing them, but maybe in the smaller groups. What do you think, Kassie?
Well, and I would add, in the Florida Coastal Challenges, we had about, I'm going to say 50, but maybe it was 30. I don't know. It was people coming together. It was what I would consider a really large team, and we started. I would start with a mind map that's like up at the front while you're talking, where people can contribute. And then I would probably have multiple easels or multiple problem trees that are a kind of open source and that everybody can participate in. And if you have a core team, or you want to invite some people to narrow down them, and then people can vote on which ones you're going to focus on, and then choose from there to focus through that. That's a way to get everybody involved. And it's also it's also a way to get like the postdoc who's read 30 articles on this and knows something that somebody else doesn't know in the room to contribute. So I would like start big like that with a mind map and then zero in. But if your teams are already established and they're already like really core, then maybe trying to find a way for them to go through the process in the smaller groups, because like the linking relinking could be restructured as an icebreaker activity, but if you're going to sit down and do the full thing, it really does take time and needs like 3 to 5 people. Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because in the coastal challenges we did start with a large group and we had them doing sessions that actually helped them identify where their strengths were, and from there we broke out into 4 teams. People chose what do you think the most important areas are that need to be tackled in coastal challenges, and then from there they came up with about 6 different large topics, and then we said, okay, what are the 2 that excite you the most? And then they put their names under these, and that's how we formed the teams that went under. So it was what excites you, you know, and so people weren't thrown into something, they were placed into something they were actually excited about. So glad you could come today and be a part of this. I hope this was helpful, and I wish you all a wonderful weekend. Thank you.